With the vaccination campaign well underway in Europe, Spain says it will keep the names of anyone who refuses the shot and share the list with other EU countries. This as the nation hits a grim milestone of 50,000 dead from the virus. In Mali, 3 French soldiers are dead following the bombing of their armored vehicle. The deaths bring to 47 the number of French soldiers killed in Mali since France first intervened militarily in the country 8 years ago. Votes are being counted in the Central African Republic a week after groups staged a coup in the run-up to elections there. There were no major problems, but some polling stations were closed because of rebel attacks. Hello everyone, I'm Monty Francis with the latest world news from Paris. We begin here in Europe, where a massive vaccination campaign against COVID-19 is now underway. The EU is expected to have some 12.5 million doses in hand by New Year's Day, and the goal is to have 200 million doses out to the public by September. Meantime, Spain has just hit a grim milestone with more than 50,000 dead from the virus and says it will set up a registry of people who refuse to be vaccinated. Catherine Viette has that part of the story.
As Spain marks a grim milestone of 50,000 deaths from the coronavirus, the government has announced new measures. It plans to create a registry to track those who refuse to be vaccinated.
El registro COVID-19 es un requisito y una medida de prudencia. Pues se toma nota de esto a los efectos del registro, a los efectos de que quede constancia en su ficha médica, por así decir, bueno, pues de que ha habido este incidente y de que no se deba a un error del sistema, por así decir, de no haber proporcionado a esta persona la posibilidad de vacunarse, ¿no?
Officials say data from the registry won't be made public, but it will be shared with other EU member states. The coronavirus pandemic has hit Spain especially hard. Nearly 1.9 million people have been infected. A new poll found that 28% of Spaniards say they won't be vaccinated. In the capital, many expressed their skepticism about the new vaccine.
Prefiero que se vacunen otros antes. No, la verdad es que no me fío nada de la vacuna y creo que el gobierno está mintiendo.
Importaría, mientras esté avanzado el estudio y sea seguro, pues no tengo problema.
The government is counting on the vaccine to help stem the tide of new infections. Officials say they hope to have 2/3 of Spain's 47 million people vaccinated against the virus by June.
Now to Switzerland, where hundreds of British tourists escaped a mandatory quarantine by fleeing a popular ski resort. They slipped out under the cover of night after Switzerland announced new restrictions for anyone from the United Kingdom because of that new variant of the virus discovered in Britain. Andrew Hillier has the story.
A disappearing act that's left their Swiss hosts angry and bemused. Under the cover of darkness, British holidaymakers slipped out of their hotel rooms and fled the Verbier ski resort to avoid a mandatory quarantine. Switzerland had been one of the only countries where foreign tourists, including Brits, could still ski. But on December 21st, that changed when a new, more contagious strain of coronavirus was identified in the UK. Switzerland responded by shutting the border, suspending flights and imposing a quarantine on anyone who had arrived from the UK after December 14th. But the resort's head of tourism has downplayed the incident, insisting that things have been overblown.
Peut-être que certaines personnes sont parties en catimini, mais on n'a aucune information officielle à ce sujet-là. Et si c'est le cas, je pense que c'est vraiment une minorité parce que les personnes qui seraient parties, où est-ce qu'elles auraient été? Je veux dire, elles ne pouvaient pas rentrer en Angleterre sans passer par les voies officielles. Et si elles allaient en France, maintenant la France a mis en place une quarantaine pour les personnes issues de Suisse.
Local authorities say that at least 200 British holidaymakers fled the resort. Either way, it's a huge blow for Verbier. Tourism officials are already planning to offer discounts as an incentive for the skiers to come back.
Now to Saudi Arabia, where a high-profile activist is getting a bit of a reprieve. She played a major role in the campaign to lift the country's ban on female drivers. A court convicted her of terrorism-related crimes in May of 2018. Now another court has reduced her time in prison. Julia Kim reports.
There's light at the end of the tunnel for Lujain Al-Hatlul. A Saudi court sentenced the women's rights activist to 5 years and 8 months in prison, convicting her for seeking to change the country's political system and harming national security. but it also suspended 2 years and 10 months of her sentence, time that she'd already served. That means Loujain Al-Hathloul could be out of jail by the end of February 2021, as long as she doesn't leave Saudi Arabia or commit any crimes, according to the court.
The sentence will continue to hang over her head. She will continue to feel threatened. The travel ban for another 5 years and 8 months will be imposed on her as well. And honestly, this is a complete mockery of justice. She should not have to spend another day in prison.
Loujain Al-Hathloul was arrested in May 2018 after campaigning for years for Saudi women's rights, including lifting the ban on female drivers. Just weeks before that landmark decision, she and at least a dozen other female activists were thrown in jail. In November, her case was transferred to the country's specialized criminal court, which deals with terrorism cases. Her trial drew international condemnation, with US President-elect Joe Biden promising to take a tougher line than Donald Trump on the kingdom's human rights record. In an interview with France 24 last month, Loujain's sister Alia was optimistic.
Saudi Arabia is fearing the new American administration. I would like to call my leaders, my Saudi leaders, to say, this is the time. Do not embarrass yourself anymore and release my sister, release Loujain and the other activists.
Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia has consistently denied accusations of abuses and warned Western countries not to meddle in its domestic affairs.
In Shanghai, a lawyer-turned-citizen journalist has been sentenced to 4 years in prison. 37-year-old Zhang Zhen posted first-hand accounts of the situation in Wuhan, China, at the very start of the coronavirus outbreak. Her accounts differed from the state's official line. Cole Stangler has the story.
Police push back journalists and try to block cameras from filming as tensions mount outside a courtroom in Shanghai. Inside, the journalist Zhang Zhen was sentenced to 4 years in prison, months after posting live videos and essays from Wuhan in the early days of the coronavirus pandemic. While Zheng is accused of, quote, picking quarrels and provoking trouble, her lawyers say she was just trying to share information.
在别的国家，言论自由和新闻报道自由是非常的公开和敞开的，在中国反而不一样。特别是因为在武汉发生这个事，那张展他是抱着希望能够帮助武汉人民，希望能够去了解他们的疾苦，能够让外界有所知道，来就是每个人能更好的回避这种灾难嘛。
Zheng's reports were widely shared on social media last February and were at times critical of the government's response. A lawyer by training, Zheng launched a hunger strike in June and has reportedly been force-fed through a nasal tube. She's also one of several to be detained by authorities after offering first-hand accounts from Wuhan. Fellow journalist Zhen Zhouxi, pictured here, has disappeared entirely. State media have widely applauded the government's handling of the pandemic, crediting President Xi Jinping with keeping the country safe.
Now let's take a look at some news in brief. The trial of the so-called Hong Kong 12 began Monday. The pro-democracy activists faced charges related to an illegal border crossing when they tried to escape the city by speedboat, seeking sanctuary in Taiwan last August. At least 2 members of the group could face 7 years in prison for organizing the attempted escape from a city where democracy activists held massive protests against Beijing's rule. The U.S. House of Representatives has rejected President Trump's veto of a defense spending bill. The move sets the stage for the Senate to do the same. It would be the first time Congress has moved to override a veto by President Trump, who has a laundry list of objections to the bill. They include an order to change the names of military installations commemorating Confederate generals. It also restricts his ability to pull U.S. troops out of Germany, South Korea, and Afghanistan. In Niger, voters are eagerly awaiting the results of a nationwide election that's expected to mark the country's first transfer of power between 2 democratically elected presidents. Since gaining independence from France in 1960, the country has seen 4 coups and has been overwhelmed by poverty and Islamist violence. The ruling party's candidate is the overwhelming favorite to succeed the country's current president. Now to Mali, where 3 French soldiers are dead following the bombing of their armored vehicle. The attack happened in the Hombori region of the country. The deaths bring to 47 the number of French soldiers killed in Mali since France first intervened militarily 8 years ago in the fight against jihadists in the Sahel region. Andrew Hillier has more.
It's a reminder of the ultimate sacrifice soldiers sometimes pay when serving their country. 3 French soldiers were killed on Monday in Mali when an improvised explosive device struck their vehicle during a military operation. The Élysée Palace released these photos of the 3. In a statement, the office of the French president said it saluted the memory of the soldiers with the greatest respect and stressed France's commitment to fighting against terrorism. It happened in the Hombori region of the country. The soldiers were operating as part of France's Operation Barkhane, which aims to drive jihadists out of the Sahel region. France first intervened back in January 2013, when Islamic jihadists overran large parts of the country. The deaths bring to 47 the total number of French soldiers killed in Mali. Some 5,100 troops in all are spread across the arid Sahel region. They fight jihadists alongside soldiers from Mauritania, Chad, Burkina Faso and Niger, who together make up the G5 Sahel group of countries.
Now to the Central African Republic, where votes are being counted a week after groups staged a coup in the run-up to elections there. There were no major problems in the capital, but in other parts of the country, more than 14% of polling stations were closed because of rebel attacks. James Facina has the latest.
With the seals cut off, ballot boxes are opened and vote counting gets underway. And despite concern from observers, the Central African Republic's government is pleased about Sunday's turnout.
With these armed men, the population was not able to exercise its civic rights. But the plan to secure the elections worked. And if only 2 out of 16 prefectures were unable to properly vote, I'd call that a success.
But reports of stolen polling material outside of the capital Bangui has stained this tranquil image, with the United Nations warning that many stations never opened or were forced to close due to voter intimidation. Chaos in the lead-up to Sunday meant that many didn't receive their ID card in time for the election. Rebels took control of several towns in an attempted coup, prompting President Touare, who's seeking a second term, to call on Russia and Rwanda for military support. But residents are still hopeful the vote will kick-start an era of stability in the country.
Ce qu'on souhaite, ce que la population centrafricaine souhaite pour l'avenir ou l'après-élection, là, c'est seulement la paix. Voilà.
On a peur. Les femmes, les enfants ont peur.
It's the second time that voters are being called to the polls since the civil war erupted in 2013. Fighting between Seleka rebels and anti-Balaka groups has killed thousands and displaced a quarter of the population, with armed groups now controlling 2/3 of the country's territory.
We're finishing in Taiwan, where a giant baby panda made her public debut earlier today. The cub was born on June 28th. Her name is Wan Bao, which means round baby in Chinese. She appeared before a group of reporters and photographers alongside her mother. She's the second giant panda to be born in captivity in Taiwan. That's it for now. Stay tuned for more world news here on France 24.